Hi, my name is Tiffany Wright, and this is episode 3 of Lawyering Behind the Scenes. Today we're going to talk about the lawyering that goes into public companies, and we'll be using the company Tesla as a case study. So Tesla is very popular, especially here in Silicon Valley. There's many Teslas driving around despite their high cost value. So everywhere you go, you'll see a Tesla, you'll see charging stations, and they're becoming popular all over the country. Tesla has not been without controversy, particularly because their CEO, Elon Musk, is an eccentric character, and he just doesn't care, it seems like, some of the time. He just does whatever he wants. He is, let's call it a free spirit. He's a free spirit for sure, which does not bode well for being CEO of a public company, because you are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So we'll get more into that later, but let's just start from the beginning. So the structure of a public company, generally there'll be the CEO, which in Tesla's case is Elon Musk, the chief executive officer, and he's also on the board. And reporting to the CEO would be the general counsel or the chief legal officer. So the general counsel, Tesla has notoriously gone through 7 general counsels, which is crazy. They cannot keep a general counsel. They have a huge legal department, but have not been able to have someone stay in that position long term. The current general counsel is Alan Prescott, and he became acting general counsel in December of 2019 when the previous general counsel left to go to another tech company. So under the general counsel's purview is generally various departments within the legal department. So it would be like subgroups within the legal department. It just depends on the company structure. So I looked into Tesla's company structure, and from what I could gather based on LinkedIn and other sources, they basically have a few subgroups. So that's general overarching, compliance, litigation, corporate, employment, intellectual property, product, contracts, not sure where they sit, but a function of the legal department besides product contracts, and real estate. So we're going to go through each one of those and give an overview of their importance in a public company, and then for some of them dive more deeper into how how it works within Tesla based on information that's publicly available. So let's get started. The first group we're going to talk about is the IP group. So intellectual property, like I've kind of talked about a little bit in previous videos, is patents, trademarks, copyrights. Primarily in a tech company, it's going to be patents and trademarks. Trademarks, those are your brand names like Tesla. Tesla is a common name though, it's named after whatever his name is. Something Tesla, I'm totally blanking right now, but the famous scientist, Nikola Tesla, I feel like. Something like that. So other companies, other organizations, other trademark holders hold the name. Most interesting about Tesla's intellectual property, though, is the patents. In 2014, Elon Musk announced that they were going to open source their patents, which I haven't really heard of any other company doing. But they were a leader in their space, so they decided to open source their patents. And open source generally comes into context for software and source code, where an inventor, a software engineer, will make their code publicly available, usually subject to certain terms, broad terms of like what it could be used for. I remember one time I was reviewing an open source, this is like when I first got into the legal field, and I was reviewing an open source license, and it said can be used for good and not evil. So sometimes they get a little cheeky, I would say, with the ways that you can use the code. Generally, they're overarching in terms of how you can use them, and they're not really usually that specific. So Elon Musk decided in 2014 to open source their patents, which usually you would file with the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office here in the United States. Outside of the US, there's other bodies that govern it. And he decided to make it publicly available so that there could be a knowledge share in the industry, and different car companies could use the Tesla patents to improve their product, and there would just be like this knowledge share within the industry. Even though that was in 2014, I wasn't really able to find that much information about how that has had an impact on their business, and if it was a really good business move on their behalf, and how other companies have leveraged the open source of the patents. So I guess stay tuned. Patents are a long-term game. They can usually be for like 20 years. You can own a patent. You just have to, go through a renewal process. So unless somebody comes up with something more novel than what Tesla has done, we won't really see that much on that, but I'm tuned in and interested to see. So next, we're going to talk about the product group. So a product group, it will negotiate contracts of either software or hardware that needs to go into a product. And they will also be responsible for the terms and conditions related to the product. So they will oversee and work closely with designers, engineers, and in the case of Tesla, manufacturing, and really oversee that product production process. So Tesla, they'll have to negotiate a lot of parts that go into their product, including semiconductor chips and other design tools that they need to develop their product. And they have a group within Tesla who manages that process. Kind of all there is about that, I would say. Next, there is the employment group, which is probably pretty busy. I'm kidding. But in most public companies, it's a busy group because you're managing, typically here in the Valley, it's a lot of organizations are international. So you're managing employees on a global basis. And you have to account for the differences in law. You have to account for the different cultures and how that impacts the law. And then you have to account for just the day-to-day stuff that happens with employees. And I've heard some crazy things from employment attorneys that goes on that you wouldn't think. Like, you think that people just come to work and do their job, and that's just not the case. There can be really petty arguments between employees. There can be valid issues between an employee and their manager, harassment, discrimination, people not getting promoted where they feel they should get promoted. I mean, it's just constant drama. And Elon Musk and Tesla have some particular issues related to employment because they do have a manufacturing arm. And for instance, this video is made in June 2020, where we're still undergoing the coronavirus pandemic. And Elon Musk basically said he was going to disobey the stay-at-home order that was here in Santa Clara County. So he said, I'm opening up my plant, and we're essential. I guess that was his argument. Like, we're essential. I don't care. We're opening up. We are here for business. So then he sued Santa Clara County and, I'm sorry. It's not Santa Clara County. It's Alameda County because it's in Fremont. So Alameda County, he sued Alameda County and said that the rules of like closing down non-essential businesses were a power grab, which is kind of ironic to say that the government is making a power grab for other reasons that we'll get into later. And he dropped the suit 11 days later. So just another day in the life of Elon Musk and working at Tesla. So that was handled by their litigation group, I am sure. And the litigation group oversees lawsuits for the company, both incoming and outgoing. So like when they're suing someone and when they're getting sued, so they can have connections to employment, to product. They work with the other teams within the legal group to settle disputes. So they'll also, a good point to bring up about legal departments is while there's a lot of attorneys within the department, they do use outside counsel, which is what you call the law firm that you would hire to assist you. So litigation involves a lot of work by outside counsel. It's not typically the lawyers within the department that are actually litigating. They're overseeing the litigation, and an outside firm will have attorneys and litigators who actually, do the litigation work and go to court and fight the case on either side, either as a plaintiff or as a defendant. So we'll see how the litigation group is impacted and some of the other groups, especially when we get into the corporate group, and particularly how that has impacted Tesla. So next group is real estate. And not much to say here, but real estate is big for Tesla because they have manufacturing plants. So they have to have a pretty big real estate footprint. And here in the Bay Area, they have a fairly large footprint for their manufacturing facilities and then their general offices. So the attorneys in that group will negotiate leases, and sometimes facilities will also sit under that group and handle the day-to-day issues related to the property that is either leased or owned by the company. So another function is compliance. So compliance connects a lot with litigation, because if you're found to be out of compliance with regulatory law, which we'll talk about more when we talk about corporate, a group within legal or a person within legal or a function within legal that is solely responsible for that outside of, the corporate group, the litigation group. And interesting things about Tesla is in their last annual report, again, this is in June 2020, so their last annual report was earlier this year, they said that they had received notices from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District relating to air quality, obviously. They dispute certain of the allegations. They have also received an information request from the EPA. So the EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency and is a federal group. So the Bay Area Air Quality Management District obviously is local to the Bay Area. And the EPA oversees federal regulatory, environmental, air quality, that type of stuff. So they also are reviewing Tesla's compliance with the Clean Air Act related to their Fremont facility. So they have some compliant issues that they have noted in their annual report, and we'll just have to see how those pan out, whether they'll settle or whether it will lead to a dispute with the government. Stay tuned. That sounds kind of interesting because I think people are becoming more aware of environmental issues. So next, we are going to get into the most interesting part, which is the corporate group for Tesla. So that has been the source of their controversy, is within the corporate function. Public companies are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So I'm just going to read their mission verbatim because I thought it was very flowery. The mission of the SEC is to protect investors, maintain fair and orderly and efficient markets, and facilitate capital formation. The SEC strives to promote market environment that is worthy of the public's trust. It sounds so noble. All jokes aside, the SEC is a very important function, especially for shareholders. So just thought that their mission sounds so nice, so patriotic. Very interesting. Especially given the litigation that involves the SEC. So that's funny. So the corporate group taking a step back, the general counsel is also usually you'll hear them called general counsel and corporate secretary, chief legal officer and corporate secretary. So that corporate secretary part is their function on the board of directors. So public companies have to have a board of directors that help oversee the company. They keep the CEO in check, quite frankly, and they are responsible for overseeing the company as like an external independent function that's not within the company. So the corporate secretary, the general counsel, in their role as corporate secretary, will make sure that the governance is followed, and they will document board resolutions and any decisions that the board makes and file them with the SEC. So the corporate function has a very, very intense filing obligation. So they're constantly running up on deadlines of what they need to file with the government. So that will be like their annual report, any stock purchases that exceed a certain amount they need to file, interested parties when they have a stock transaction. So when Elon Musk, when he trades stock, and because he's, a company, they always have to document that. So the corporate group is usually the busiest group within a legal department in a public company. They have a lot of work to do, and it's continuous and it's deadline driven, where the deadlines can't really be like, if you're in the product group and you have a release of a product, there are things that could push back the release of a product, and you could be more flexible on that. In a corporate function, there's really not that much wiggle room that they have for their deadlines that they have to meet, and if they're not going to meet a deadline, they have to file the appropriate paperwork with the SEC about that too. So let's get into the juicy part. In August 2018, Elon Musk's now infamous tweet, which Twitter has gotten a lot of people in trouble, and you think like it's just like little short phrases. It has opened a world of mess, and it's so funny that something that you could create as a social media mechanism could have world leaders, CEOs, all these people using it just to say whatever they want. And most of the time there's really no repercussions. But when you're a public company and you're regulated by the SEC, there is consequences and shareholder consequences. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So on August 7th, 2018, Elon Musk tweeted, "I'm considering taking Tesla private at $420. Funding secured." So let's go back. I'm a shareholder of Tesla. Hypothetically, I'm a shareholder of Tesla. I see this tweet and I'm like, wait, what? You're going private? Do I sell? Do I buy more stock? Because now funding's secured. I should buy more stock so I can have a bigger holding. So then when it goes private and, I get all that conversion. So it was a mess. It was a hot mess. Because it was just something off the cuff that he tweeted. Didn't talk to anyone, didn't talk to his legal department, just off the cuff. Funding secured, thinking of taking it private, $420 a share. So it led to a hot mess, as you either know or you could probably guess. So right now Tesla and Elon Musk are facing about 10 consolidated suits regarding securities fraud. It's like $20 million a piece that people are suing, basically saying that he misled investors. Because what happened after he tweeted that is that Tesla's stock price rose 6% that day. That day he tweeted those less than 10 words. A few weeks later, he's like, just never mind. Like, I was saying that because I thought it would be funny, and like I found out that 420 was related to like marijuana, and I thought that would be funny for my girlfriend, and random weird response that I'm not going to even talk about. All his subsequent behavior after that, how he went on that podcast and was like smoking weed on the podcast, like only in America in Silicon Valley can you get away with that stuff. That he could do everything that happened after that, had his behavior, and this was in 2008. It's been 2 years and really no repercussions. Tesla's still doing fine. He could do all that and still remain CEO of a public company. Amazing. And a few weeks later when he's like, oh, just kidding. we're not going to go private. We're going to stay public. It fell 15% below the price that had risen. 15%. That is a lot in the stock market. So what a hot mess. So they're still going through litigation related to it. Like I said, there's been about 9 consolidated suits for fraud, and then there's been a bunch of suits that stemmed after that. The SEC had an action against him that they settled, and that got taken care of. But then the consolidated fraud suit is from the shareholders, which shareholders can sue a public company because they're investors in it. And when you breach your fiduciary duty as an officer or an executive of a company, you can have severe consequences. And maybe we'll go in depth with that more in another video. And Tesla's whole argument in this whole thing was like, oh, well, he wasn't making his statements as a CEO, he was making it as a potential bidder, which makes no sense at all. This is why they've gone through, personal opinion, this is why they've gone through 7 GCs, because how could you sleep as a general counsel of Tesla when you have no idea what this guy's going to say? So since then, they have implemented a policy saying that it requires oversight and pre-approval of his tweets dealing with certain when Tesla's financial and business affairs, which should have been policy to begin with. But there's a process, and especially if you're talking about a material transaction, like taking a company from public to private, there is a lot of checks and balances within a company that deals with that. There's another suit. I just thought this was funny, and it was related to that whole mess that happened after that tweet, is where Aaron Greenspan, who's a short seller, which I think I will do a video about stocks and short selling because it is very interesting, and I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about the stock market and what short sellers are, and it's all very, very fascinating. So I will do a video on that, but Aaron Greenspan filed a suit against Tesla. He says he's a short seller, and he claims that a Tesla shareholder, OMAR QAZI, and his company SMICK Enterprises have served as an attack dog and ferocious online propagandist for Tesla and its billionaire founder, i.e. Elon Musk. So I point to this suit not because of, there's a lot of causes of actions related to this suit. It's ongoing litigation. It's related to the tweeting incidents, but the funny part about it is this quote that was in the complaint. This is what one of the first lines of the complaint says. This is a case about whether or not the wealthiest members of society should be permitted to lie with impunity, and the means that they will use to silence those who justifiably question them. Like, how dramatic. I love it. That's all I have for you today. I thought this was a really interesting topic. I think that the inner workings of public companies are just so fascinating. Thank you for watching Lawyering Behind the Scenes, episode 3 on public companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe. Please follow me on Instagram.